Hello and welcome to the podcast. I am your host Donna. Join me as we deep dive into real and raw conversations about love, life, money and business. Hey guys, it's Donna and welcome to the Amplify Her podcast. So today I am going to share something with you from a very real, raw and vulnerable space. I am, as I record this podcast, feeling extremely nervous. And I wanted to do this podcast with you guys because I am feeling so nervous. And because I think this is something that every single human being on this planet goes through, and most of the time we hear about this after the person has gone through it, but never usually while they're going through it. And so I thought, you know what better time to actually sit down and record a podcast from, a space where people can really get it, because it's easy to hear it from the person who's already done it. But, when you're in that space, it's kind of like, oh, well, it's good for you did it, but, I'm still sitting here going through it. And essentially what I want to kind of get into today, guys, is that feeling of that space in time where you know that something has to change in your life or business. And it's at that point where it's starting to feel uncomfortable. Yeah, so a couple of different examples of this that I know I certainly have faced in my life is relationships that I'd stayed in for too long. Relationships where I loved the person, it felt comfortable, it was familiar. At the same time, it wasn't a relationship that was conducive to the person who I wanted to be. It wasn't helping me to grow as a person. It wasn't healthy, all of that sort of jazz. So, that's certainly been a space where I've kind of had to go, there's going to have to be a big shift here. I'm going to actually have to leave this person who I love dearly, who I know is not good for me, so I've had that. Jobs are such an easy one, where we can easily fall into that job and you start to know this job like the back of your hand and you get to know all the people and it's very comfortable and you could do the job with your eyes closed. That's how bloody easy it is, right? We kind of know that we want something else or that we're ready for a next level of something, but again, it's so comfortable. Leaving your job. This was a huge one for me when I went into business. I pretty much left my job and, packed my bags and traveled. And that was all kind of in the space of 1 month. So that was a huge one because there was no certainty around job security or anything like that, or if I could make the business work, so there was lots and lots of, kind of spaces in time, which I know I've certainly felt this point in time where it's like, well, either I do something or in 6, 12, 18 months from now, I'm going to feel miserable. And so I kind of got to a point like that more recently in the last kind of 6 months where my business is at a point where it's really comfortable, like I know without even kind of questioning it that I can get clients, that I can help people, that I can make money. Having a business and running it is very easy to me in the sense that I know this level of business, but there's another level of scaling that I know that is available to me. And it's been a level that I've been curious about, but again, it's that point in time where it's like, well, if I do this, it's gonna feel really, really uncomfortable. There are gonna have to be things that I need to do that I've never done before. And obviously I've never done them before because if I had, I'd have those results already, but I don't. I have the results that I have, right? And so I had to kind of get to that space where it was like, well, okay, that this is comfortable. And, this is a conversation that I have with clients a lot. It's like, why don't you want to leave this space? Well, it feels safe. It feels comfortable. And this is a question that we all need to ask ourselves when we have these moments in our lives is it really safe? Because if you do stay in this spot for another 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, is it going to feel that safe? Is it going to feel that comfortable at that point in time? Or are you going to feel miserable? And 9 times out of 10, people will say to me, yeah, no, I'm going to feel awful. Like I'll feel depressed and I'll feel sad and I'll be upset and all this sort of stuff that they, come up with, frustrated. And I had to ask myself this question more recently. And it's interesting because 9 times out of 10, I'm the person who's giving those questions. And I had to self-coach myself recently through these same questions and go, what, don't I staying the same way really that safe? When I thought about it, I was like, no, and I value growth. Growth is exceptionally important to me. And as a leader myself, I need to be the example of growth. So I went, well, bugger it. You know what you need to do? You need to lean in, right? And I had to acknowledge that fear is something that is just an illusion. fear that was coming up for me, this nervousness, this anxiety around going and doing the things that I needed to do, to the point of like feeling the tears well up in my eyes because I felt really anxious and scared to, lean into this new level of myself. That was all just an illusion of fear. Nothing's going to happen. I'm not going to burst into flames or anything like that. The worst case scenario is that I get a no. And out of 10 people who I approach, I might get, 9 no's and 1 yes. And that's certainly how it's happened in the past. And I know that about business. I know that it's certainly a matter of, just putting yourself out there and consistently showing up. And eventually something's going to stick. And I've been in business long enough to know that, right? And so what I had to remind myself is that fear is a primal emotion. Fear is a primal physical emotion. And so the fear that is coming up, fear is, it stops you from touching the burning pot, from walking out in front of a car, from accidentally walking off a ledge. If you didn't have that fear pop up, it wouldn't stop you from doing things that physically keep you safe. But the problem with fear is that if it's in a dysfunctional space, so if it's from a space of it's not actually serving you to keep that fear, that's when it becomes a problem, right? And so in this instance, I had to recognize, making this new up level and scaling my business in the way that I plan to isn't actually a real fear. It's just something that is unfamiliar, right? And so that is the functional version of having fear in your life, is to acknowledge its presence, know that it's there, but also to know the difference between it when it's actually real harm and when it's something that's just popping up just to try and keep you safe, which is all that this was. And the reason why I share this with you guys is because I know that so many of you are facing this, if you're, whatever part of your life you're having to face this in, whether it be relationships, jobs, businesses, health, whatever it is, I know that each and every one of you has experienced this feeling. And so I wanted to share with you how I kind of worked myself through this, right? So what I had to do is I had to kind of sit there and go, honestly, where am I at now? And evaluate what that looked like for me right now, And so what it looked like for me right now is that I'm very comfortable where I'm at, and I can continue to be this comfortable, like I know how business runs now. It's not one of those like, oh, one day when I get there kind of things. So to scale and to get to that next level, I had to then look at, what happens if I do this? And what happens if I don't do this? So what happens if I do take these steps, and what happens if I don't take these steps? I encourage you guys, when you're making a decision like this, if you're in an uncomfortable position in life where you realize you need to make a move, to acknowledge where you're at and ask yourself these 2 questions, right? So once you know what will happen if you do and what won't happen if you don't, then you have to kind of recognize that you're going to be okay with either one that you decide. If you decide not to do anything and stay exactly where you are, there's a possibility that life may come along, because that's typically what life does, and it may shift you along and may move you along further anyway, or it may just stay the same. And are you going to be okay with that? Can you live with yourself without having any regrets that that's what you chose? And then the second part to that would be that you make the shift, and maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't, but either way, could you be okay with that worst case scenario? An example of this was, guys, when I left my job. I packed all my bags, moved over to Bali with my partner, and I had no idea if I was going to be able to replace my income at that point in time. Yeah. So I had some clients, but not enough to replace my income at that point in time. And so I just went, stuff it. I'm just going to believe myself, take the leap, because the only other alternative was to stay exactly where I was at that point in time and to hope that I could replace my income and then make the shift. And I just couldn't be there anymore. I got to a point in time where I was like, I know I'm ready for this growth. Just cannot put myself through this any longer. I don't want to do, putting on 2 different caps each time, going to a job and having one cap there and then taking that cap off and putting another cap on for business. That was hard work. It's a lot of energy to swap between 2 different caps if you're a side hustler. And so I went, stuff it, I'm going to do this. And that was my first $30,000 month, so it worked out pretty well for me, but I had to take the leap. I had to have the faith and I had to trust. And I also had to be okay with the worst case scenario being that I'd, fail and I'd have to come back to Melbourne and I would have chewed through all my savings and I would have had to go back to my job with my tail in between my legs and go back to where I was before. And the thought of that felt awful, but the thought of not doing anything felt even worse. And so because of that, I was then able to make the decision that, okay, well, this is what I need to do then. This is what I encourage you guys to do is, look at each outcome and trust that you're going to be okay with whichever one you choose, right? Once you've chosen one, you need to know how you're going to get there. So if you don't know how to get there, then you need to get the right help from the people who do know how to get you there. So when I made the decision recently, I've made huge decisions lately, guys. I've recently decided to go back to school to hire a mentor who is like $70,000 a year. I've never paid that much for a mentor in my life, usually 10K here, 10K there, but this is a ridiculous amount of money that I've decided to spend on this guy. We've booked in our new wedding venue, so we've got all of this stuff going on at the moment where there's lots happening, and I've made huge decisions, and I've decided to scale my business on top of that, right? That is a lot of stuff to do. And so I had to recognize, okay, cool. Well, if I want all of these things to happen, I need somebody who has done that, who has the roadmap of how to get there, to show me what I need to do next to get to that point, because this is new and unfamiliar. I know how to do business in this way, but I don't know how to do it in that way to get to that next level. And so I've gone and I've encountered those people, and as scary as it is, I'm doing what I need to do to make that happen. So the third step is putting into place what you need to get there. The last part of that is taking the action and trusting whatever will happen will happen. So there have been times in my life where I've gone for something and it hasn't worked out in exactly the same way that I hoped it would. And then there have been times that I've gone for something and it worked out exactly how I hoped it would. But for every moment where it hasn't worked out in exactly the way I thought that it would, it's typically meant that I wasn't ready for it, or there was a few lessons in getting there along the way, or there was something that I was meant to do, or somebody who I was meant to meet, or some lesson I was meant to get before I got to that point in time. I've always ended up getting to wherever I wanted to go, whenever I wanted to get there, right? Like it's never been an issue for me, because the amount of resilience and tenacity I have to get to that point is, crazy. Like I just will not give up on what it is that I want. At the same time, it doesn't mean that I got it straight away. It doesn't mean there weren't tears. It doesn't mean there wasn't frustration. So there is an element of trusting that whatever happens, even if it doesn't feel like it's, what you wanted at the time, there's going to be a reason behind it. And I'm sure that, as you listen to this, you're probably going, oh yeah, I've had moments like that before, moments of like, it didn't work out that way, but then something even better appeared or something like that. We had that with our wedding. We had to cancel our wedding in Bali because of COVID, and it ended out that it's probably the better thing, because we found this beautiful, beautiful venue in Queensland that is even better than the one we had originally, and it fits everybody. It's perfect. It's just the most beautiful venue, and I actually like it much better than the original one we had anyway. So I choose to believe that all happened because, we were meant to get married somewhere else. I'm always being looked after, I'm always being guided. And so I trust that, whilst it felt disappointing to have to cancel our wedding initially, it was all done for a reason. And so for anything that kind of happens with these decisions, guys, you need to be okay with knowing that it may not work out your way, but there will be a way that it works out for you. I trust that this has been helpful, guys. And, as I said, I'm sharing this from a very real, raw and vulnerable space, and it's something that's very new with the podcasts, actually. I used to do them, pre-recorded, a couple in a row and send them off to my podcast manager and get her to do them for me. But I've more recently kind of gone, it's actually better to do these, from a space of either something I'm experiencing that I can share as a learning, or something that, I've been speaking a lot about with clients, so that I can share that with you guys as a learning. I've been kind of doing these more from a space more recently of things that you guys can really, really relate to, and that are quite real, raw and vulnerable, because I think that they're kind of the best spaces, where we learn from. So guys, I trust that this has been helpful. If you have any questions, comments, or anything like that, I'd love to hear from you. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Okay, bye for now.